Our breaking news tonight, 3 officers dead, 3 wounded in Baton Rouge. A really tough day for Baton Rouge and for the country, really. Here to talk about how to keep our police safe is Sheriff David Clarke of Milwaukee County, Wisconsin.
This is Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke, former paratrooper with the 2nd Ranger Infantry Company. He looks exactly like what he is and looks like he is going to do exactly what he is going to do, end Don Lemon's career. This is Don Lemon. He is the recipient of Columbia Journalism Review's 2014 DART Award for the Worst Journalist of the Year.
He is going to be
it's important to note that David Clarke's initial reaction, while ostensibly contentious, is actually a gesture of mercy. He is providing Don Lemon an out. There's just one problem. Don Lemon is the worst journalist of the year.
Their hearts were reeling. Their message is peace and coming together in the country. What's your message?
You don't believe that for 1 minute, do you?
That their message is?
Yeah.
That's what they said to me.
Immediately you will notice Don Lemon utilized the Coward's Defense Part 1. When confronted, he immediately absolves himself of personal responsibility and shifts the blame to the very people he claimed to support.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe them. Of course
Any protests over the deaths of these cops today in Baton Rouge?
I don't know that. I don't know that.
Any riots or protests over the police officers in Dallas, Texas?
What are you asking?
It's a pretty simple question.
Note that as he maximizes the ambiguity of his source, he also maximizes the ambiguity of the individual words he chooses. To say, "That's what they told me," instead of "That's what name told me," is forgivable in casual discourse where nothing is at stake. To say it under the guise of journalist is either highly unethical or just colossally unskilled, which probably has something to do with. In the time-honored tradition of Plato's philosopher kings, T.T. Clarke magnanimously, desperately, tries to give Don Lemon another out, this time through the Socratic method.
Any protests over the deaths of these cops today in Baton Rouge?
I don't know that. I don't know that.
Any riots or protests over the police officers in Dallas, Texas?
The Socratic method is a form of cooperative, argumentative dialogue between individuals, based on asking and answering questions to stimulate critical thinking and to draw out ideas and underlying presumptions. One participant may lead another to contradict themselves in some way, thus weakening the defender's point. It is employed to bring out definitions implicit in the interlocutor's beliefs or to help them further their understanding. The Socratic method is a method of hypothesis elimination. Inner hypotheses are found by steadily identifying and eliminating those that lead to contradictions.
Any protests over the deaths of these cops today in Baton Rouge?
I don't know that. I don't know.
This is an excellent example of the Coward's Defense Part 2. To say you don't know something that you do know because admitting you know it means you have literally debunked yourself. Once again, this is forgivable in casual discourse, but becomes problematic when you are a professional journalist covering riots in Baton Rouge and Dallas, and think it's acceptable to say you don't know if there have been riots in Baton Rouge or Dallas, which probably also has something to do with.
I don't know that.
Any riots or protests over the police officers in Dallas, Texas?
What are you asking?
It's a pretty simple question.
Here we see a classic example of the Coward's Defense Part 3. When confronted with irrefutable evidence from a superior intellect, pretend you don't understand despite your best efforts, and imply that this is the fault of the speaker. This is also an excellent example of someone realizing they are humiliating themselves, which usually leads to the Coward's Defense Part 4. Unoriginally copy the method of the superior intellect, because if I lack the intelligence to give a coherent response without lying, then this person must too. Unfortunately, Don Lemon, worst journalist of the year, in assuming all people are cowards like himself, does not anticipate what Sheriff Clarke is about to do, which is to do the exact opposite of what Don Lemon did. Take personal responsibility for his thoughts, stand up for his beliefs firmly and respectfully, and display irrefutable rationalism backed by objectively verifiable research.
I asked you if what's your message to the people. Their message is one of peace. What is your message?
My message has been clear from day one 2 years ago. This anti-cop sentiment from this hateful ideology called Black Lives Matter has fueled this rage against the American police officer. I predicted this 2 years ago. So what I want to know,
okay, Sheriff.
Do I want to know?
With all due respect, do you know that this was because of that?
Yes, I do.
As a law enforcement officer?
I've been watching this for 2 years. I predicted this. This anti-police rhetoric sweeping the country has turned out some hateful things inside of people that are now playing themselves out on the American police officer. I want to know, with all of the black-on-black violence in the United States of America, by the way, when the tragedies happened in Louisiana and Minnesota, you know that 21 black people were murdered across the United States?
Don Lemon, Worst Journalist of the Year, now panicking, resorts to the Coward's Defense Part 5. Interrupt any mention of irrefutable, empirical data before they can be completely spoken out loud. Don Lemon, Worst Journalist of the Year, knows that if he lets David the Truth Clarke finish pointing out the hypocrisy of the media and its hateful constituency, then Don Lemon, Worst Journalist of the Year, will have to choose between accepting either the irrefutable, empirically proven title of Don Lemon, Worst Journalist in the history of all that is extant both physically and metaphysically, or the irrefutable, empirically proven title of Don Lemon, Worst Ex-Journalist in the history of all that is extant both physically and metaphysically. Don Lemon does not want to do this, because Don Lemon cares first and foremost about Don Lemon appearing to be valuable as opposed to actually being valuable. Let's see if he's actually valuable.
Well,
was there any reporting on that?
There was a black officer who was killed today. But
was there any reporting on that?
Sheriff, please, let's just keep the volume down here.
No.
So I understand, and listen,
I'm looking at 3 dead cops this week,
Sheriff,
and I'm looking at 5 last year. You trying to tell me to keep it down?
Just please, if you'll just please, we can keep it civil. So,
the Lemon here opts for the Coward's Defense Part 6. Appeal to the superior intellect's humanity. Here the Lemon, somewhat shockingly, makes the correct assumption that David the Truth Clarke has a tremendous amount of empathy for not just the people that have elected him 4 times and kept him in office for 14 years, but also the individuals who are blindly killing innocent strangers and accomplishing an incomparable amount of nothing whatsoever. But remember, this is Don Lemon, and Don Lemon is not Don Lemon without making massive logical errors easily avoided by most feral children. Because while the truth has love for humanity, the truth also has no empathy for the coward Don Lemon. This is an excellent example of what the beginning of the end of a career on television looks like.
That the message to people at home, I'm sure you want, is one of civility.
I wish, Don, I wish you had that message of civility
have a conversation
toward this
with you.
Hateful ideology, these purveyors of hate.
You don't know what my message is.
That's
what I want
they
to say
do.
to you is,
these people preach vile and virtue
in the
name of hate.
And we'll be right back.
And there it is, the 7th and final part of the Coward's Defense, run away. It's hard to blame the Lemon though. After all, that is David the Truth Clarke.
The past and the present merge to meet us here.
It is not a good sign when you return from a self-imposed coward break and your ex-ranger guest looks like this.
Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, and we're here live in Cleveland.
Unsurprisingly, after granting himself a reprieve, Don Lemon, Worst Journalist of the Year, scolds the superior intellect on conversational methodology.
What it sounds like to me is that you're accusing me of violence and supporting a narrative that I'm not necessarily in support of.
So what happened during the Lemon's time out? After a few deep breaths and a juice box, Don Lemon, Worst Journalist of the Year, realized he is actually Don Lemon, super duper star. This kind of realization is symptomatic of someone who might win an award for Worst Journalist of the Year from a prestigious Ivy League institution motivated by an intimate understanding of the value of self-regulation. It most often leads to a narcissistic defense, an attempt to assert control in a way that will benefit only yourself by way of appearing to understand effective debate protocol. This is not a recommended defense technique for people who fall into the category of Worst Journalist of the Year. And the reason is because Don Lemon, Worst Journalist of the Year, still hasn't realized that it is in fact David the Truth Clarke who has a PhD-level understanding of logic and argumentation. Let's now watch Don Lemon, Worst Journalist of the Year, move stupidly forward into the lethal embrace that is the iron truth of Sheriff Clarke's euphonious words.
If you're accusing me of that, then you're welcome to leave. But if you want to have a conversation, I am more than willing to welcome a conversation with you. I don't disagree with you about there's a narrative across the country that could be harming police officers.
Observe the Lemon unwittingly reveal his perception that everything in the world makes sense relative only to his own personal, cowardly, narcissistic interpretation of reality. He then invokes a fun spin on the Coward's Defense Part 7. The Lemon realizes he is languishing in the modern nepotistic comforts of a left-leaning television studio full of modern nepotistic comforting left-leaners. So, in the terrifying face of this, Don Lemon, Worst Journalist of the Year, essentially tries to reverse runaway under the pretense of moral superiority. He's also ostensibly threatening to kick his guest out of his own interview by leveraging his control of the record button. There's just one problem. He's trying to intimidate David the Truth Clarke, ex-ranger and 4-term elected official who happens to be talking calmly, respectfully, and rationally about solutions to hate groups and the murder of innocent fathers and husbands. And, for some reason impossible to understand, Don Lemon still has yet to realize that the man he thinks he is intimidating is actually about to end Don Lemon's career.
If that's what you're accusing me of violence, then you can leave. That's not true. I don't support violence of any type against police officers, against anyone. So if you're accusing me of that, then you're welcome to leave. But if you want to have a conversation, I am more than willing to welcome a conversation with you. I don't disagree with you about there is a narrative across the country that could be harming police officers. But we don't know right now, as someone who's in law enforcement, if that was the actual cause of it. Go ahead.
Let me ask you this. Do we know that generally the American law enforcement officers are racist? Do we know this?
Go on.
Holy shit.
I ask a question.
Here's a tip for some other unnamed entertainment personalities that are going to be confronted with the end of their careers in the near future. When you hear yourself start babbling, it means your career is about to end. This isn't a problem in casual conversation, but does become a problem when you are paid to be the supposedly urbane face of a national news network, which, unfortunately for the Don Lemons of the world, the only people stupid enough to believe that kindergarten lie are not the side you want to be on when you need things like, say, people who know what they are doing.
There is no data, and you know this, there is no data, there is no research that proves any of that nonsense. None. Even...
You'd have to be more specific about what data and what nonsense you're talking about.
Does Don Lemon really not know what Sheriff Clarke is talking about? Because he said it straightforwardly since literally the first time he opened his mouth, and every time since that Don Lemon has tried to Gestapo him into silence. I guess maybe. We now enter the most illuminating section of the conversation. Observe as Don Lemon rides the carousel of the Coward's Defense parts 1 through 7.
White males in policing in these urban centers.
There is data that supports
There is not data.
No. The president spoke about it. Cedric Alexander, who is a law enforcement officer.
The president has been lying about it. He said it again the other day when he said black males are 2 times more likely to be shot by a law enforcement officer than white males. Don, that is a lie.
That is not a lie.
It is a lie.
Yes.
Show me.
Research.
Show me.
The research
Show
that
it to me
that we have from the Washington Post. That
the Washington Post
study.
debunked that nonsense.
There's also research.
He also said
Sheriff,
this time.
There's also research
He
from
continues?
a Harvard professor that also showed that black people are treated more aggressively by police officers.
No, you are wrong
people.
in your interpretation of that Harvard study, because I read the study. That's not what he said. He said he was surprised to find
that in shootings, of the most severe in shootings, that he found no evidence that there was a difference. Also, it should be noted that that study was a very small sampling of police departments across the country. Many people did not find it credible, but it is also...
Don Lemon decides that just to make sure he'll never work in television again, he'll cite a Harvard study to back up his point. Then, upon realizing it is in fact he who is the idiot, attempts to discredit the very study he just cited. But he doesn't stop there. Remember, this is Don Lemon, Worst Journalist of the Year. After citing a research paper to support his incoherent position, then discrediting his own citation down to the very sample size, he for some reason decides that it's still a good source for supporting his position. This is what the worst journalist of all time looks like.
Interesting that in that research, he found that blacks were treated differently when it came to aggressive policing, but for the most egregious shootings, he found no difference. That's what that study showed.
Well, based on what? Just generally? Or are we talking about high crime areas? Are we talking about police officers being under attack? Because let's go back to where this whole thing started in Ferguson, Missouri.
Please join me in wishing Don Lemon, Worst Journalist of the Year, happy job hunting by way of the leadership team at CNN. Not a lot of black people. What do you guys think about Don Lemon's performance?
As trees.